Some games you finish and move on. These are the N64 games that had a way of making 12 a.m. feel like 7 p.m. The ones where you'd look up and realize you'd been playing for 4 hours without noticing. Whether it was one more battle, one more race, one more match, or one more dungeon, something about each of these made stopping feel impossible. Ogre Battle 64 is the game on this list that required the most from you before it gave anything back. And once it gave something back, it kept you going until sunrise. The real-time strategy structure, where you set up squads, send them across a map, and manage their positioning and alignment without direct control over individual fights, is the kind of system that takes 2 hours to understand and 30 hours to feel like you've mastered. I stayed up trying to master it repeatedly. The alignment system is what made it compulsive. Every decision you make, who you recruit, which towns you liberate, how you treat enemies you capture, shifts your characters along a moral axis that determines what classes they can promote into. Playing with a high chaos alignment locks you out of the best units. Playing too lawfully can make you miss routes. The game is tracking decisions you don't even realize matter, and discovering a promotion path you'd never seen before at hour 25 felt like finding a door in a room you thought you knew completely. The story has a political weight that most strategy games gesture at without committing to. There are factions with actual competing claims, betrayals that make sense in retrospect, and a final act that lands differently depending on what you did across the full campaign. This is the kind of game that doesn't exist anymore in quite this form, and going back to it now still produces that same pull toward one more map, one more unit promoted, one more ending discovered. WWF No Mercy is still considered one of the best wrestling games ever made, and playing it across a full night with rotating challengers is exactly the context it was designed for. The grapple system created a physical logic to wrestling that the devs had been refining across several games. By No Mercy, it was perfect. Every reversal, every counter, every finisher felt like something you'd earned rather than something you'd input correctly. The championship mode had a branching story structure built around wrestling logic. Win your match, advance. Lose, deal with the consequences. Interfere in someone else's business. Watch the politics shift. It wasn't sophisticated storytelling by any conventional standard, but it understood professional wrestling's own storytelling language well enough to replicate the feel of a months-long storyline arc in an evening's play. I ran through championship modes with multiple wrestlers just to see what changed. The roster depth and the ability to create custom wrestlers with full move sets extended the game's lifespan well past what its match count suggested. A created character built specifically to beat your friend's main, tuned, adjusted, tested across 5 matches, was its own project. No Mercy understood that the people who would stay up all night with it were the people who wanted to go deep, and it gave them somewhere to go. Perfect Dark took everything GoldenEye established and doubled it. More gadgets, a more ambitious solo campaign, bots and multiplayer that you could customize down to individual behavior, a co-op mode that let a second player join the campaign, a counter-operative mode where the second player controlled enemies trying to stop the first player. Rare understood exactly what people wanted more of and then gave them more than they asked for. The solo campaign had a tonal shift from GoldenEye's grounded spy, thriller, aliens, corporate conspiracies, interdimensional political conflicts. It swung bigger than it needed to, and I think it mostly landed. The Datadyne Assault in the early game, the Air Force One mission, the Carrington Villa, these are levels designed with a confidence that suggests Rare knew they were making something people would still be talking about. The secondary objectives in each mission gave experienced players a reason to replay content that was already engaging the first time. What I remember most is the bots. Setting up a multiplayer match with custom AI opponents, adjusting their difficulty and loadouts, finding combinations that produced chaotic and specific kinds of mayhem. That was its own hobby inside the game. Combat Simulator had enough modes and maps that you could spend an entire week rotating through configurations without repeating yourself. Perfect Dark was the kind of game that made the N64's limited library feel less like a limitation.
That, my dear, just look.
Mario Kart 64 solved a specific problem. How do you make a racing game that a room full of people with different skill levels all genuinely enjoy at the same time? The answer was rubber banding AI in single player, blue shells in multiplayer, and track designs that had enough width and shortcuts that experienced players could find edges without the game becoming a skill gate for newcomers. Whether that's elegant design or deliberate chaos depends on who's winning when you ask the question. The 4-player split screen was technically impressive for 1996, and the tracks were designed for it. Wide enough to accommodate 4 racers without constantly forcing contact, varied enough that the same race played differently depending on which weapons were distributed. Rainbow Road is the obvious highlight because of how unforgiving its guardrail-free outer edge is. But Toad's Turnpike and Wario Stadium had their own reputations for producing the specific kind of last-second disaster that sent a room into chaos. Battle Mode is where most of the late nights happened. The balloon battle maps, Block Fort especially, produced sessions that started at 10 and ended at 2 without anyone suggesting a stop. Block Fort's four-structure design created natural territory that groups instinctively divided and defended, and the balance of the map at 4 players was close enough to fair that rematches always felt winnable. Mario Kart 64 is a game built for rooms of people, and in rooms of people it was almost impossible to turn off. GoldenEye 007 gets discussed as a cultural landmark so often that it can be easy to forget how good it actually was to play. This was the game that proved the first-person shooter belonged on a console without an argument, and the solo campaign was the thing that kept you up alone, not the multiplayer, which gets most of the credit. Working through Facility on 00 Agent for the first time, realizing that the mission objectives had changed from what you'd memorized, having to adapt on the fly. That loop was addictive in ways nothing had prepared me for. The level design understood something about pacing that most shooters hadn't worked out yet. Rooms reward observation. Guards have patrol patterns that matter. The silenced PP-7 changed how you approached every situation it was available for, and recognizing that you could thin a room from a distance before anyone raised an alarm felt genuinely intelligent. The game was teaching stealth before stealth was a genre checkbox. The multiplayer is where the nights actually disappeared. 4-player split screen in the facility bathrooms, proximity mines on every surface and complex, the specific collective rage of getting hit by a clob in a way that should have killed you faster than it did. Those sessions had an energy that came from the combination of the game's systems and the particular chaos of playing with people who knew each other. GoldenEye 007 is the rare game that holds up both as design and as memory. Paper Mario arrived in 2001 when the N64 was already on its way out, and it became one of the last games that made staying up with the console feel completely justified. The art style, Mario and his world rendered as flat paper constructions that fold, flip, and interact with each other, was immediately distinct from every other RPG available on any platform. It wasn't just a visual trick. The papercraft aesthetic shaped puzzles, combat animations, and world design in ways that made the whole game feel unified. The turn-based combat uses an action command system where timed button presses affect the outcome of attacks and defenses. It's simple enough to learn immediately and has enough depth to stay interesting across a 20-hour runtime. Attacks can be super guarded with frame-perfect timing. Status effects have specific counters, and boss patterns require reading behavior before reacting. I found myself getting better at it the longer I played rather than falling into autopilot, which is rare for a system this approachable. The partner characters that join Mario across the game each bring abilities that change how you interact with the overworld. Discovering what each partner unlocked in areas you'd already visited was a consistent source of the one more thing momentum that made it impossible to find a good stopping point. Paper Mario understood how to pace revelation, and it used that understanding across every hour of its runtime. Majora's Mask is the Zelda game that still feels genuinely strange in ways the others don't. The 3-day loop that resets the world, the masks that transform Link into different beings with different physics and abilities, the town full of characters with specific schedules and specific fates that play out whether or not you intervene. It was unlike anything the series had done, and it used its constraints to say something that a bigger, more open game couldn't have. The moon falling toward Clocktown across 3 days created a kind of ambient dread that settled over every other activity. Even in a dungeon, you were aware of the timer. Even solving a puzzle, the music told you time was passing. I stayed up not just to finish objectives, but because the game made stopping feel like abandoning the world to its fate, which is a psychological trick that worked completely. Resetting after you'd learned something felt different from losing. It felt like going back with information. The side quests are where it kept me longest. The Unju and Cafe quest in particular is one of those side stories in RPG that you always remember. It required paying attention, keeping notes, and returning at specific times over multiple cycles. The game rewarded that investment with an ending that felt genuinely earned rather than unlocked. The original Super Smash Bros. Is a smaller, stranger game than the sequels that followed it, and that's part of why I held attention so well. 12 characters, 9 stages, a fighting system that replaced health bars with percentage damage and knockback scaling. It sounds simple until you're at 150%, trying to survive a single hit from someone who learned the DI mechanics 3 hours ago while you were learning them for the first time together. The single-player classic and adventure modes had a completionist pull that fighting games rarely managed. Unlocking hidden characters required hitting specific percentage thresholds or win counts that encouraged staying with the game long past what one session would normally last. Finding out that Luigi had his own slot by losing a match while holding down and watching him appear was the kind of secret that got passed around school hallways the same week. Multiplayer was where the nights went, though. The combination of familiar Nintendo characters in an unfamiliar context, Mario actually hitting someone, Link's sword connecting with physics, made every match feel slightly ridiculous in the best way. Home run contests and board the platforms gave single players something to chase. The game had almost no budget in terms of modes, but used every mode it had efficiently enough that you never noticed what was missing. Star Fox 64 is one of the most purely satisfying games to play on N64 hardware, and a significant part of that satisfaction comes from how completely it commits to making you feel like a fighter pilot. The Rx movement, the lock-on system, the way the camera pulls back during certain boss moments to show you the scale of what you're fighting. It's showmanship, and it works completely. Every run through Corneria felt cinematic in ways that the hardware had no right producing. The branching route system is what made a game you'd come back to rather than complete and set down. Taking the difficult path at each junction and finding a new stage you'd never seen, or hitting a specific score threshold that opened an alternate route. These are the hooks that kept sessions going past the natural ending point of a completed run. The game could be finished in under an hour, but figuring out every path through the galaxy map took considerably longer. Multiplayer was split-screen dogfighting, and the Landmaster tank mode specifically was something no other game on the platform was offering. The unlockable expert difficulty rearranged enemy formations and increased damage across the entire game, giving players who'd memorized the normal route a reason to stay. And Peppy telling you to do a barrel roll never lost its effect, regardless of how many times you'd heard it. Some voice lines earn their place in memory and never leave. Mario Party 2 is the game that ended friendships in real time and somehow made people want to play again immediately after. The board game structure, everyone cooperating to move forward while simultaneously trying to sabotage each other's coin counts and star totals, created an environment where the game itself was only half of what was happening. The other half was the table of people watching someone lose a star they'd spent 3 turns earning to a Bowser event, and the specific quality of that silence. The mini-games are better here than in the first game, And the themed boards each have mechanics built into them that change how you have to play rather than just providing different visual backgrounds. Horrorland's Day-Night Cycle that activates different Bowser events. Westernland's Train that you can pay to steal stars from opponents. These weren't cosmetic additions. They changed the math of what you should be doing on any given turn. The single-player minigame modes kept me busy alone when nobody else was around. The minigame coaster and the dual maps gave the mechanics room to breathe outside the board game structure, and discovering which minigames had reliable strategies versus which were genuinely random was its own research project. Mario Party 2 is the game that made group gaming feel like an event rather than just a way to share TV.